This is Cover Your Ears with Brian Geller. Unlocking the secrets of the music industry.
The numbers all go to 11.
You're about to get the inside scoop from the industry insiders.
You go with the Van Halen tickets.
You never know what you're going to hear on Cover Your Ears.
Now raise your goblet of rock.
What is up, friends, musicians, and family? Welcome to this edition of the Cover Your Ears podcast. You're listening to episode number 5 here at Ultimate Ears Studio in Southern California, and I'm your host, Brian Geller. As I record this, it's Saturday morning. We're in November, and my God, the holidays are coming, which means NAMM is right around the corner. Hey, a huge thanks to everyone that has downloaded the podcast. I really appreciate all of the support. It means a lot. Now, the band has a huge surprise in store for December, so be on the lookout for a big announcement. Now, if you happen to be in the LA area this weekend, you can catch the Punks at a brand new spot this Friday and Saturday at the Rock and Brews at the San Manuel Casino in Highland. 2 sets each night, which means we'll dig deep for lots of classic Van Halen, so don't miss it. For show details, check out the Atomic Punks on Facebook and Twitter, as well as www.theatomicpunks.com. This episode of Cover Your Ears is brought to you by Ultimate Ears Pro, setting the standard for custom in-ear monitors for more than 20 years. I've been using Ultimate Ears in-ear monitors for over 6 years now, and they're the real deal. If you're a musician and still using wedges, take it from me. No joke, give yourself a break and take your performance to the next level with custom in-ear monitors. Musicians, my singing career was about done. Too much singing to go with lots of bad technique. But then Fred Curry of Cinderella hooked me up with Ultimate Ears. In-ear monitors changed to everything. To learn more, visit pro.ultimateears.com. Today's guest is none other than John Bisaha. If you're not familiar with John, he's got a great story, so you're in for a real treat. He's an amazing singer who is currently fronting the revamped late 70s band, The Babies. We talked about a lot, including vocal lessons with the late great Karen Carpenter, the pressure of being compared to John Waite, and the fact that he was this close to fronting not only Toto, but also Chicago. I guess you could say he has some vocal chops.
So, man, in 1979, if someone would have told you, John, that you were going to be in the Babies, what would you have said?
I would have flipped out. There was no way in 1979 that I was going to be in the Babies, but boy, in 1979, the Babies mattered.
How old were you in 1979?
I was the ripe old age of 17 years old in 1979.
Okay, so you got me by about 4 or 5 years there, right?
Oh, so thanks. So you're calling me old already.
Usually I'm the older one, okay. But I think back to 1979 for me, like the Head First album, and I'm thinking Co-Rec. Now, Co-Rec in the South Bay and Torrance, Redondo Beach, that's where we went to the dances. And, man, I just think of the Babies back then. And that must be so cool to be a fan of a band that you're fronting now.
It's absolutely amazing. I was in bands in, high school. And then when I left high school and did some touring with some companies that are, singing and dance companies, and we'd form our own bands off of that. And, one thing led to another with one band that, we went pretty far in the independent days. My friend name was Greg, and Greg, Braccio was just a killer guitar player, and his biggest influences were the Babies and Journey. And it was like, wow, hook me up to these guys. And so, we started doing that. I'm like, man, these guys have some really rich tunes. Sure. They've got a singer that won't quit. They've got a drummer that just, and the signature guitar sound. It's like, it was friggin' amazing. So yeah, it blows me away, dude, to know that they were one of my favorites growing up. So, when I wrote stuff that kind of went through the Babies meets Journey meets a little bit of ELO or Chicago.
Right.
Those were my bands that I followed back in the day.
So take me back before we get into that. I want to hear all about this.
Okay.
We've hung out a few times, but we've never got to really dive into the whole thing. But before we do that, how did it all start out? Do you come from a musical family? You were a 70s kid like myself, so music was all around us. But how did it start for you? Where are you from?
So I was born in New York. I was born in French Hospital in Queens. I lived in Astoria till I was about 3 or 4 years old, and my folks made the trek out to California. But both my parents were singers, so they used to do doo-wop stuff, standing on the corner in New York, where they would sing with some of the Del Satins, were some of the big bands back in the days, right? Right when the Four Seasons were doing their stuff. But I mean, you had the Motown stuff that was going on. You had the 50s doo-wop stuff that was happening, and they were sitting right in the middle of it. So I got my chops from both of them. And then I started doing like little AM radio jingles. I was about 4 years old.
How did you hook up doing that?
Just a friend of a friend. They kind of could tell I could sing. I think I drove my father had started the trek out from New York, and so was there ahead of us paving the way. So we drove across country with my uncle and my mom. I was an only child at that time, and I was just a huge. I think 7-Up had a jingle called 7-Up Your Burst Away, and I just sung that song for 3,500 miles. And I think by the end of that, my uncle was like, "Yeah, we either need to just kill him or we need to find him somebody who can do something with this." So I think that's how it all happened.
It's interesting because the podcast is relatively new, and I'm going on a little bit over a half a dozen episodes, and the one common denominator, and it doesn't matter what type of music the individual's been in, but the one thing has been the parents. It's been the musical influence of the parents and how we grew up. And it goes to show you that the parents do matter. It does rub off. I mean, where do you think you'd be without all that influence? You think you still would have found it? I would have hoped I would have still found it, right? But I tell you, there's nothing like having the support of your folks, right? I mean, I won't claim to be a saint. And growing up, I certainly probably gave my parents some room for pause and what have you. But the one thing that they couldn't take away from me was my music, and they wouldn't take it away from me because they knew A, how much it mattered to me, but B, really that was my avenue, and that might have been an outlet not only for creativity and for self, but potentially for vocation and a job going forward. And I think they helped foster that. So absolutely, the support of your parents means everything. I mean, we as parents, if we can go ahead and educate our children and expose them to different things, the arts, sports, and others, then you've got a well-balanced child. And I think my parents did that with me, and we try to pay that forward with our kids. Right. So you move out to California now. How old were you?
I was like 4 years old. KLAC Radio was my first jingle that I did. It was
which is still around, right?
It's still around. I don't know if they would. I have no idea if they ever used how long they used my jingle. I was so young to even really remember it. I just was told, I remember doing it. I don't remember really what it meant to me back then.
Right.
But probably meant, a couple pairs of shoes.
That's so much fun. So you end up in Southern California. Whereabouts?
We started off in Norwalk, but lived in Downey
through
my middle school years, and then we moved out to a little suburb called Walnut, just outside, Diamond Bar, Walnut, Pomona area. That's where I went to high school. I went to Walnut High School, and kind of been a Southern Cal guy ever since.
So the bands, when did those kick in? Like middle school?
Oh yeah, so I actually started singing in choirs and things like that, like in 5th grade. So we had an actual progressive elementary school, and our teacher was really into the arts. So we used to do these way outer Broadway, talent shows in Downey, and go to the big Downey Theater and do all that stuff as, a 5th grader, 6th grader. So I always kind of was in organized kind of singing, and in junior high, a lot of sports through elementary and junior high. And then when I hit 8th grade, I moved to Walnut area, and that's when choir started happening, sports kept going, and that's when the band started happening, because hey, bands means chicks, and you started to hit 14 years old and 15, and chicks dig singers. So that's the motto.
Did you always want to be the lead singer?
I've always been able to sing, so I won't say I always needed to be, but it always kind of defaulted to me, from that. I'm not a very boisterous type of a person, I'll let my voice do my talking, but when it would become clear that, yeah, you need to be the lead singer. So I would be the lead singer, and we had some really good bands back in the day. It was, back in those old high school days.
Right. Amazing. Yeah. And the great thing about the 70s too, is you didn't have to throw your hat on one genre of music. I mean, there was so much going on. I know in my household, we had surf music, we had the disco music. I mean, even the movie soundtracks of back then. And then as we got older, it was, then you started getting into the more harder rock stuff and the early heavy metal things. I mean, it was just a great era of music that's, to me, is untouched right now.
Absolutely. My exposure to music, through my parents, through what they would have from records, and most of their record stuff was, really R&B, a lot of Motown stuff. And then you'd have the Carpenters albums, or, Carole King Tapestry, maybe a couple of James Taylor records, right? So it was really kind of what we would call adult contemporary back in those days.
That's where my parents bought their records
pop,
too.
What have you. And then we went through this whole Motown phase, right? And so in the 70s, that was the standard. I mean, I love John Denver. Imagine the dichotomy of going from John Denver to Elton John, right? Or going from the Carpenters to Blue Oyster Cult. My uncle used to give me records for Christmas. And so my first big record collection that he gave me I had Jackson Browne, the Pretender, ELO, the one that had Out of the Blue,
right?
And Blue Oyster Cult's record with Don't Fear the Reaper. I mean, that was life altering, before Zeppelin was really hitting it with me and all those others, because I was in this mainstream folk AM top 40 stuff that was pre-AOR days.
I found Led Zeppelin 4 probably about 6-7 years after Led Zeppelin 4 came out, but I don't think I really understood and got into Zeppelin until I was probably in my 20s, where I really embraced it.
I'm right there with you. Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
I knew all the hits, right?
Sure.
But In Through the Outdoor was my first record that I had. And so then I had to go backwards, because my heaviest to Zeppelin coming into that was, I was just getting, in those days, even In Through the Outdoor, you're still heavy disco era. So the Bee Gees were still killing it, right? You got all that stuff that's going on. But then, Van Halen's doing that. Van Halen used to come to, my 8th grade dances and play Van Halen and the Crew.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was, and then these bands start hitting it. It's really kind of funny when you really get down to it.
Amazing.
It's pretty funny.
So did the vocals come naturally, or did you take lessons? Did anybody help you out? How did that all work out for you?
I locked myself in a room, because like I said, I could always really sing, and I would just sing to the radio whenever we were driving. So, pretty much nonstop since I was a little kid. And then when I started getting into high school, if I wasn't doing a gig, or I wasn't playing something, because I played football, baseball, basketball, I was in my room locked into whoever was the flavor of the month. And, through my high school days, ELO was huge. Journey obviously was huge. Chicago was probably my staple. So it's why it's not a hop, skip, and a jump to wonder why I dug the Babies, because I love strings. With ELO, I loved horns. I loved big vocals, and there you go. But yeah, it was. I always would gravitate towards singing, because I figured, it's probably what I do best.
So what took you to playing bass, though?
That was a necessity, right? So when you have a few bands, you have the bass player who would, go off on other things, or would, rather leave and do some other stuff. And I kind of taught myself like I would teach others. I'm pretty right brain, left brain. So bass to me was very mathematic, I literally was like, first string was like, 1, 0 was an open fret, 1 was the first fret. So when I started learning like Happy Man by Chicago, I was like, second string, 3rd fret for the C. And I was 2, 3, 2, 0, I was like, what the heck? So I was having to do a mathematical equation. And so it's completely self-taught. I've never taken a bass lesson. I did take one voice lesson back in the day with a guy named Al Berkman, who was Linda Ronstadt's voice coach. I was a junior in high school, and one of my girlfriends was going to him, and he helped us out, and had like a whole community class of maybe about 10 or 15 kids. And he'd just gone to one of our concerts and pulled me aside. I was just a spectator, and said, go sing that song that you sung at this thing. I want you to show people how you sing. And I'm like, and I did my thing. And he goes, this is how you sing. This is correct placement. This is something like, he goes, you don't need to know anything. Just don't hurt yourself. Go. So that was my one and only voice lesson. And I've hurt myself over the years, but I've learned how to, help myself too, because being in my 50s now, and still being able to rip, it's pretty cool.
Well, and I find too that in my in-ear mix when I'm singing that I prefer a little bit more bass than anything else. I don't know what it is or what the scienceology of it or whatever, but I seem to match better with that bass pitch, and it kind of helps me out.
Yeah.
What's the deal with that?
Maybe it's your placement, right? Because David, stuff like that would be more lower range until you get up on into it. But I think you're going to feel your stuff from the bass. It pounds, and it's where I find my groove, right? I mean, playing with Tony, it's great. Imagine being a bass player in a band who has an English backbeat drummer, and you are a singer, so you're singing on top of the beat, playing behind the beat, right? It's like amazing. But when you can find that pocket and that groove and having that bass, I write most of my songs off of a bass guitar.
So you do it on the bass?
I do it on the bass,
Interesting.
I don't play guitar. I play piano just enough to be dangerous. And I'll know all my chords to be able to go ahead and do that. But typically I'm writing riffy type of things. So typically that'll be just doing a riff off a bass or off an acoustic guitar because, just jamming something.
So to prove that I actually do homework and do prepare for my guests that do come in, albeit this was last minute. I mean, we've been trying to set up the interview for a few weeks now. So you just called me an hour ago. Let's do it today. I'm like, okay, I need to get something. And one of the first things I found on the internet was this whole thing about the Carpenters. Tell me about that. This is just really interesting.
So when I was in about 7 years old, we were living in Downey, and Downey had a year-round sports program called Downey Junior Athletic Association, DJAA. And so when you're in second grade, you had to be 7 years old. Nowadays, you're 5 years old, you can go play club teams right now, right? But you had to be 7, you had to be in second grade, and you had to go off and, sign up. And
why is that? Why did they do that? At Little League, I don't think we could start until 8 years old.
You were 8 years old, right? Back in those days.
Now kids they're playing T-ball like, well, he'll be 4 in a few months.
Get them younger.
Right.
Get those prodigies out younger. Sometimes it's a hit. Sometimes you burn the kid out at 5. He's not ready to do this, right? So there is a little bit of that. I mean, I wanted to be a dad because my father was my coach. That's one of the main things that brought me to wanting to be a father was I wanted to teach my kids how to play ball.
And, so your dad coached you?
Yeah, he was my coach all the way from second grade to when we moved, so 5 years, but, those for me were the growing years, right?
Right.
And those are when, that was big time bonding. So,
exactly.
It was pretty cool. But yeah, so I went and did that on one of those teams. We played, like 5 years in Downey. And one of the teams had this guy named Mike McCann. And Mike was just this great kid out of North Downey. And most of us were from South Downey, so we were literally, we were hop, skip, and a jump away from Paramount and Compton.
Right,
and it was,
right.
And these are actually some pretty hairy days. Closer
to the 710 or the 605?
We were, right in the middle, right?
So, exactly.
It was like Imperial and Lakewood, right? Just you're moving down, and we won't go into the political quagmire that was like 1967, 68, right? We go off to Mike McCann's house, and Mike lived in North Downey. We were all a bunch of poor kids from South Downey. He was the rich kid on our team. It was awesome, right? So we'd go to his house, and he lived in what we called the Little White House. It had 4 major pillars. It looked like the White House. But catty corner, if you would go down, his house literally looked on a cul-de-sac that was right down. And in the end of that cul-de-sac were 3 houses built together, and that was the Carpenters. So the
Carpenters lived on the cul-de-sac.
Right on the cul-de-sac.
By the way, who didn't want to live on a cul-de-sac in the 70s?
No doubt.
Right?
No doubt. Huge streets.
No cars. I remember the days going to my cousin's house, and there'd be 20 kids, and we'd all have big wheels. And you'd line them up in the street because you could do that and race down the street. There's no cars.
Yep.
So you got the Carpenters that actually lived.
The Carpenters were there. And on that street, I believe maybe all day, maybe 5 or 6 houses, maybe 1 or 2, and then the 3 that they had in the back. So, we would go over to the Carpenter's house. We'd go swimming at Mike's, and they were all friends. And Mike's mom's like, let's go over to the Carpenters, the Carpenters are. Well, I'm like, I sure as heck know who the Carpenters are.
So you understood.
Oh, I already knew. I'm
big
7 years old. I'm already singing
Wow.
the Carpenter stuff, right?
Right.
So I know all of it. And I'm like, absolutely, I'm getting the chills now talking about it.
I am too.
So I go over.
I live down the street from the Carpenters Performing Arts Center in Long Beach. And there's something about that music that they created, her voice. I mean, I'll drive by and think about her voice and just, get tingles. There was something about her.
She was so rich, and the bottom end that she had a huge range, man. But the bottom, to her voice was just so rich and robust. It was just amazing.
And by the way, I'll just play the drums too. And
and
the trumpet
very effectively.
And,
she
why
had the
not?
best drummer of the year was Karen Carpenter. I don't know how many years
Crazy.
in a row, right? The woman could shred. Yeah. So we would go over, and ding dong, and we went over. I think I want to say it was there at least 3 years in a row that we went. But the first time we went, maybe only a subset of the whole team went. Most of the kids stayed back, but Mike's mom brought me over because she knew I wanted to go, and maybe about 3 or 4 of us went. And so we sat down. So I got to meet
John's
Richard.
holding up his 8-track of the Carpenters.
8-tracks really weren't in at that time. Yeah. Oh man. So I sat down with her. We sat
And for
down
those
on
of you that don't know what an 8-track is, talk to your mom and dad. They'll explain it.
Perhaps.
Or
your grandfolks.
Right.
Yeah, so we sat down at the piano, and she starts running me through some scales. I hear you're a little singer, and so then she starts playing one of her songs, and I start singing it with her, and she's like, "You're really good." So Karen Carpenter.
Not only do you get the baby's gig, but you're sitting there.
I was told by
singing.
Karen, she said, "You are going to be great. You are going to go somewhere someday." And I was like, I'm like, "Dad, did you hear that? Dad, because." Karen Carpenter said, so it was very cool. And so she fostered that. So I met her 3 times. Beautiful lady, just a great lady. But that was my shindigs with the Carpenters, soaking wet from a pool party, walking into their house and jamming some Carpenters tunes.
Wow, wearing some OP shorts, hang 10
they
socks.
were probably
right,
cut off jeans
yeah.
back in those days. OP didn't happen for me until I hit my high school time.
That's true.
Then I could afford to have OP. Yeah. We were, it's all good.
That's great.
But yeah, that was my Carpenter story. Yeah. So, just a great family, great lady.
That's awesome. So let's move on to high school. So the bands must have really been kicking in for you by then. I mean, you're out there doing your thing. What was that like?
It like I said, it was the great way to get girls, right? So, I was in our choirs, so we had several different levels of choirs. And in those days, our choir group, we had show choirs and chorale choirs and all that stuff. Our show choir was a national choir group. We would go and do a lot of tournaments and festivals and win. There was it was a mixture of our group, Walnut, or West Covina High School, or Colton High School, and occasionally Troy out here that could do this. But it was four groups out of California would crush the nation. It was very, very cool back in those days. We would do some pretty rad stuff because we were like we had a bunch of jocks as well as singers, right? So we had guys that were on the football team that were 6'5", that could go lift a chick with one arm, and nobody could do that stuff, man. So we've got 4 guys that are 6-something, holding girls up and throwing them in the air, and we're all doing somersaults and dancing, and nobody saw anything like that. So it was very, very cool. So doing the choir stuff was cool. It would lead to, hey, I play the drums and I do this. So, best friends in school were the drummer and the bass player and the guitar player. And, we probably formed, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 bands, but we'd play everything, anything from Zeppelin to Journey to Cheap Trick to, whoever was really in the deal that day. And yeah, it's like, they're playing, they're going to be out at the amphitheater. It was just so funny.
Wow.
So you could have fun with it back in those days. It was really, really started to catch on though when you really get out of that, you start getting into college years and you start stepping out, and then you start bringing it to like the Strip. And then when you're able to start playing out in real venues, not just, your school dance, but shoot, our school dances, like I said, Motley Crue, Van Halen. There was Ram Jam came to my 8th grade dance and gave us Black Betty on a 45. And we're like, what the heck is this? And to know that, 30 some odd years, 40 years later, Ram Jam is like a staple on all those classic rock stations. It's just amazing. And they played the crap out of it. It was like,
That's so
just
funny.
amazing. So
I know.
Yeah, when you get the young David Lee Roth and the young Van Halen boys over doing their stuff, or Vince Neil dating one of our girls that went to high school, it's just kind of you could really kind of touch it. So it was like, someday that's going to be me.
And it's interesting. Those guys, Van Halen, played so many of those backyard parties and so many of those dances back then. I mean, out of the gigs that I do, there's, especially if we're in Southern California, always hearing about, we saw them back in the day. You know, in fact, a girl that I work with here was talking about it, how her boyfriend back at that time was in a competing band, and how he was shredding on a solo, and Roth came in and turned his amp off. So you got to love being from Southern California. Always great stories. So
yeah, early 80s, we're rehearsing in Downey. So we found our way back that my bass player from high school and I remained intact, and we went and did this group called the Young Americans and sang and danced and ultimately met our wives through all that and stuff. But we were in a band together that was based out of Downey again, and the drummer went to Downey High. Everybody lived at Downey. Greg, I'd mentioned him, the guitar player, was in it. And so we'd be playing, and we were literally there 7 days a week, you know, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., and then we'd all go off and do our night jobs. And when we would take a break, we were playing at the drummer's house, and they had almost 1,000 square foot mother-in-law house. We had pool table, pinball machines, video games, and our whole setup, right? Outside of that was a full court basketball court and a swimming pool. So we'd get in at 10, jam for a couple hours, go play a little hoop, go jump in the pool, Go back and jam. And we would have this competing group where we would leave the side gate open, and then, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40 people sometimes would come in back, and they'd go listen to us. And we were jamming some originals and then the harder side of top 40, you know, doing our nightly shows. And then we started seeing these other guys that were coming. And then when we would be done, everybody would leave, and then we'd hear music about a couple blocks up. So after one of the dips in the pool, we said, let's go back. Let's go see who else is playing. So we went out, and that was the beginnings of Metallica. So it was at Hetfield's house. So you had Metallica doing their thing, and we were called Azure Blue back in the day. So it was Azure Blue on one corner, Metallica on the other, and just a bunch of kids in Downey just walking from one house to the other wherever the music was. But, you know, it's such a small world, man, you know, when you really think about it. That, you know, it's so huge, and you can get right to it. So
you can be at the Carpenter's house one day and Metallica playing down the street in Downey the next.
They weren't that good. Just kidding, James.
So when did you get serious? When did you realize this is something that I want to do?
It was probably back in those days. So I would say mid-'80s. We started getting pretty serious, and that's when the 7 days a week rehearsals were happening, and we were playing the Strip. You know, I don't know, at least 2 or 3 times a month, depending on where you'd want to go. Gazzari's, the Roxy,
Country Club, all those places.
Didn't do the Country Club, but really just did mostly, the Truby, Gazzari's, the whiskey, but I wish we'd done that. Never did that. There was a couple that we didn't really do.
I always loved the band names back then. I remember weekly going and getting the band magazine from the Warehouse or Licorice Pizza, and you look at the band names that are playing in and around of LA, and it was just so funny. Roxbury Drive and Odin and Sin, and you had the bands that went on, Rat and Great White, and what were some of your band names?
So one band was called The Nameless, because we couldn't figure out a name. So we actually did a Department of Defense tour, and they did a couple of good commercials that were almost like The Who's on First. What's your name? The Nameless. The what? The Who? Not The Who. The Nameless. The name. It was the No Names. The Who is that band with no name? So The Nameless was one. Azure Blue was another one. I was in a group called Hall of Souls. That was a good one. That one you would have liked. You would have loved them. That was Van Hagar.
Really?
Oh yeah, Van Hagar with Chicks. It was so awesome, dude. Yeah, we had a good run with that, and then grunge and rap came.
And that was it.
That was all.
Well, you thought that was it, though.
I did. I did think that was kind of it, and how am I going to figure out how I'm going to do this, So that's when rock operas came into play, and I started doing Jesus and Jesus Christ Superstar, and I would, finish out when Ted Neely would need a break.
I don't think I had that on my notes.
You don't have that on there. You
screwed
screwed up on that one.
I missed that one, my friend.
I was divine for years.
Wow. So you actually did that, huh?
Yeah. It was fun stuff.
Did you do it nationally?
I did a couple national tours and a few local, productions. Started out down in Vista at the Moonlight Amphitheater. Did a few in Upland. Kathy Rigby's got her place in La Mirada, and then we just, did a couple circle routes. But I didn't really do a lot of the touring. I was kind of like I need somebody to fill in for a day or two. Because I had this thing called corporate job, got married, wanted to have kids, make sure that's the other thing that, be a dad first and go chase your dream when the kids are asleep. That was a large bulk of time when all that grunge and rap stuff came. So
how old are your kids?
My kids now are 26 and 22.
26 and 22.
Yes.
And what do they think of dad?
Both are very musically inclined. My daughter is working for Disney right now, and she's in the AGVA union, so she's doing a couple shows there, singing and dancing. And my son is I never thought that I would find somebody who could sing like me until I met my kid.
Wow,
and
what
then
was
he
that
just
like?
took it another level. Oh, my boy's just incredible. So his name's Johnny.
So he sings like you, but
beyond.
But beyond.
He's kind of he hears colors, man. That I'm meat and potatoes rock and roll. He hears every color of the spectrum. So he'll get the notes between the notes. I'm hearing, here it is, guys. It's a third, a fifth, it's a seventh. Maybe you'll throw this in here, but he's like, no, if you do this,
But if you think about it, where you started off with your parental influence and where you came from, and then you basically did the same thing, and now he's done it or doing it at another level. Imagine what your grandkids will be like.
Yeah, well, he's a monster. I'm sure my grandkids will be monsters then, because he goes farther back than I do. I mean, he's in a prog metal band, if I had just to classify it, so he's all about King Crimson, right? And brings it all the way through to like Devin Townsend, what have you. I mean, he's got, his chops are, he'll get as much raw as you want him to be and all that, and then he'll go right from that into a pure tone, screaming it. And it's like, so I made sure, dude, if you're going to do this, you better learn how to support it. You better learn, and he's just taking it to a whole nother level. It's like, it just blows me away. So
yeah, I think usually people that are not singers don't realize the screaming part of it. There's a technique involved in screaming. You just don't scream. Yeah. You strategically scream when you need to, and you do it the right way, so it doesn't blow out all the other important stuff.
Exactly. Yep. I mean, I have to do that to myself. There'll be times when I'm at an end of a run, right? We've just done 5 and 5, and I know that I don't have anything to do for another week, and there comes a point where I just feel like I'm just going to let it rip, and I let it rip, and I let it rip too hard, and then the next morning I'm not speaking. It's like, I should have just held back just a little.
I know exactly what you mean. So how did the babies gig happen?
So let's see. I don't know. About 7 years ago, I was watching American Idol and just getting really sad. Going, I've known 100 people that I've grown up with that could crush this.
And they're cheating the system.
Oh, well, you lose 75% of everybody the first day at every audition for American Idol.
Right.
You go in groups of 4, and depending on who that producer is, if they're looking for a real singer or good shtick or good TV or the heart story, that's what you're going for. You lose 75% right out of that day. So there's hundreds of American Idols, thousands of American Idols who will never be seen because they get weeded out by that one person who's looking for the ditty that's doing this.
Well, and when it's all said and done, it's about their ratings.
It is.
So they need the right ingredients to create that proper rating that they need to keep it going.
Yeah. So I was having a heartache moment going, what the heck, man, to my wife. And she's like, I'm going out for American Idol. She's like, you're too friggin' old to be an American Idol, man. Come on, man. I was in my 40s, right? You can't be an American Idol. You're 45, 46. I'm like, shit. So, excuse me.
That's okay. So you went down and did it?
No, I didn't, Jess. She poo-pooed it on me. Said, you can't do this. Why don't you get off your ass and go make yourself a band and let's get going. So I did that. So I put together a band called Bisaha. It's really funny when you really think about it because my wife has always been in my bands as a background singer since before we were married. So we've been singing together 30 some odd years, married 28, right?
Wow.
So a very good fixture. We know, what we're doing. Well, my kid Johnny plays pretty much any instrument that he touches. So it made a lot of sense for him to play acoustic and maybe some rhythm guitar and add that voice that's really either above or right around mine and her, and Holly above. And then my daughter, she's 22 now. I mean, she was, 18, 17 years old at the time. We've all been singing since they were this big. So we'll do like a happy birthday jingle whenever somebody has a birthday, and it's just tight stuff. So imagine the harmonies of kids that have been singing since the womb, pretty much, right?
And with you all singing together.
Oh my gosh, dude.
It
it's
must
just
be
amazing. And then had a killer drummer. You might know Pat Leon. He's been around. He's a fixture out here. Has been doing a lot of stuff for a while. We had Tim LaFave. He plays with Tedeschi Trucks, was on Saturday Night Live for a while. A guy named Chad Quist on guitar.
Okay.
So we had a great band, a guy named Steve Majora on the keys. So we had 5-part harmonies, major stuff going on. So it was just a killer band. But
you're doing it with your family.
Doing it with my family. And I sit there, yeah, I'm in a band. What's it called? Oh, it's called Bisaha. That's great. Yeah, my wife's in it. Yeah. And my son's in it. Yeah. And my daughter sings in it. Yeah, you just need to go and check it out. You know, and then you see it. So I was getting ready to open up, or we were getting ready to open up for Roger Hodgson. They did for many years, they were doing a Taste of Newport. They'd close down Fashion Island in an area, and they would bring in, 40 different restaurants.
Yeah,
and
that's a fun gig. I've seen Foreigner.
We opened up for Foreigner that year.
Great show.
Yeah. Foreigner was there that year. I think it was Joan Jett was the next year, and we opened up for, I think, Bare Naked Ladies that year, and then we opened up for Roger. So I'm getting ready to go in for rehearsal for the band before the week of this gig, and I get a phone call from my friend Mike Hansen, who was in a band called Hall of Souls with me. And Mike was in a band called Glass Tiger. They had a number one, Don't Forget Me When I'm Gone.
Right.
Did a lot of stuff with George Lynch and Lynch Mob and Hurricane. He plays with them now. So he called me up and said, hey, I know you're doing your own thing, but, I thought I want to socialize something to you because I was reached out by somebody who said they're looking for a lead singer. And I'm like, it's got to be one of my favorite bands from the 70s and 80s,
Yeah, right. What's going to knock off your family? Yeah, I mean, that must have been so much fun.
Exactly. And we were getting off on it. We were having a good time with it, right? So it's got to be something like that, or it's got to be an up-and-comer on a major label, right? And he goes, yep, it's one of those. And I'm like, got anything more for me? And he's like, yeah, you know who Jonathan Cain is? And I'm like, yeah. No, first he said, you know who Ricky Phillips is? And I'm like, yeah, I know who Ricky is. Yeah, Ricky's in Styx right now, Gowan replaced Dennis DeYoung, and I don't play the keyboard. So it isn't Styx.
It's not Styx.
So he goes, yeah, I know it's not Styx. Jonathan Cain? And I'm like, whoa, bad English? Bad English is, you said, and he goes, you said 70s and 80s, right? And I went, hold the phone, man. Are you saying Tony Brock and Wally Stalker? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, get me a friggin' audition. So Mike kind of set that up.
Had they heard you before, or was it just just a mutual respect for what he was saying?
Tony reached out to a few of his friends, and then they cast the net, because they'd gone through, they'd made some sort of an open call and had, 100, 200 people that came in to try to do it, and they didn't find anybody. They had just been given. Wade had finally just said, "Look, I'm done. Don't ask anymore. I'm very happy doing what I'm doing right now. If you can find another singer, God bless you. Go for it. You have my blessing."
Okay.
So that's when they cast the net out, and they didn't get what they wanted. So then they started going down to lieutenants and saying, "Hey, do you know anybody? And Mikey's like, "Yeah, I know somebody." He actually knew a couple of people, and he put us both in, and we were both going for this thing for a while. So I meet up with Tony, and I started singing Isn't It Time and Head First were my two audition tracks that I had to do with. At the end of the day, there were three of us that were kind of leapfrogging each other. And one of the three of us didn't play bass. So at the end of the day, Tony's like, "Hey, do you play bass?" Mikey says you play bass. And I'm like, I haven't played bass in I have no.
It's kind of the equivalent of me telling my high school kids that you need to take Spanish in high school because it'll eventually help you out.
It's going to come back.
And this did the same thing for you.
And well, it did, right? And I just said, dude, I'm not Geddy Lee, man. I'm not Jocko. I'm a stock rock bass player. Nothing fancy. And he goes, "Well, have you listened to the Babies tracks?" And I'm like, "I know the Babies tracks." And he goes, "Well, do you think you could play the bass on them?" And I'm like, let me socialize it, because I still had several basses and stuff, and I picked it up from time to time, but not anything that I was actively doing, looking like I'm going to go front a band and play bass. That was 92, right? So Tony's studio's up in Chatsworth. I live down in Laguna. So it's a 2-hour drive, depending on, the time of day, it could be more.
Right.
And so I put on the anthology album, and literally I probably had 85% of the bass lines under my fingers off of the steering wheel, and then just applied it as soon as I got home and said, am I close? Just found what key I'm in, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty doggone close. So then I said, yeah, I can do this. So that kind of helped. But we went through 3 months of auditions on it.
Wow.
The
So
last
it went that
audition,
long.
it was long. I started like in, September.
Well, I got to say, your look had to help a little bit too.
They didn't really put that into account.
Because you don't look like John Waite.
I
but
do.
You kind of
I do right now.
But you kind of do.
From here up, I do. And it was really weird because at the end, we were all three of us were always going and just recording. So, we're recording into Tony's studio. We're basically singing to MP3s of those 2 songs.
So did you know the other 2 guys you were up against?
I did.
You did?
I did.
What was that like?
We never met each other at the same time, right? We all came separately, but I knew of them, and I knew one of them personally. Yeah,
it's like 3 of you were dating the same girl. And
yeah, and so we couldn't
talk.
We never talked to each other about it. One of them I've spoken to since the whole thing went down, and it was very unorthodox, right? The way we all kind of did it because it took so long. But I completely understand why it took so long, because up front, Tony was like, I can't offer you anything right now because I have nothing really to offer. All I have to offer is the fact that we're looking for a singer to bring this back. We don't have any management. We don't have a record company, but we're going to actively look. And we've got some people in the industry that could help. So I don't want to make any promises right away. And that's, I think, what kind of took it as long as it did. And I think through that was really the shake up and the shake out of really who's in it to win it, kind of who wants to be here, and I'm blessed in a position where, I do have that day job. Right. And so I don't need necessarily to have this be my number one vocation to be able to put food on the table. So I'm, and that was part of my sell to them. It's like, well, you're kind of an unknown entity. I'm like, dude, I'm selective. I don't need to do this. I don't need to be here, at the Palomino doing this, every Friday night, or doing this. I could go and do this show and make way more money, or I can do with this thing here and do this.
Right.
I could be very selective in doing it. And so they had to understand it, but I did it mostly in Orange County, and they're all in LA. I think what almost won it for me, 2 things at the end of the day. I had by then done that gig with Roger Hodgson, and so we had a nice professional video made. And so I took about 15 minutes out of my 45-minute set and condensed it into every song, basically verse chorus of every song, so you could see my performing style without a bass. And yada, yada. And the first thing they do is they look at it, and all of a sudden they see the 2 female background vocalists, and they're like, do the girls come with you? And I'm like, so I will say point blank, my wife got the job before I absolutely
That's
did.
amazing.
Because that was like another 2 months later, they're like, okay, you've got the gig.
That's great.
The last audition, they wanted to sing those songs 2 more times. Sing these songs 2 more times, and then we want to videotape you. And I'm like, you've already had me sing these songs 100 times now. I'm not going to change my tone that much. I already know what you're looking for. So if you're going to videotape me, what are you going to videotape? Well, we're going to have you sing it on a 3rd track. I'm like, no, let me just sing these 2 times, and then give me a 58 and just pump in the thing into the studio and sit me in front of your drums and just let me perform. Right. And he's like, okay, that sounds great. So they get a little camera up on me. I put a 58 in front of my face, and Tony's like, and they got a close up. He's like, you look a little like John Waite. I'm like, from here we do. I've got pictures of me in the 80s with my hair and Waite in Bad English with his hair. And I swear that was my doppelganger back in the day. His mouth's a little bit different, And he's way taller than I am, but I'm better looking, John. I'm better looking.
Have you met John before?
No, we've never met. We just know of each other, but yeah, we haven't met. He's a favorite of mine. He's, if you have to name your top 5, Waite's in my top 5.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he's
amazing.
Sing.
I'm intrigued by, again, the whole audition process. How do you prepare for auditioning for a band that you grew up loving? How does that work?
I think I've played these songs more than they've ever played these songs. Seriously, I can
relate to that.
I probably played the anthology record every moment I was in my car. So, and guitar players, bass players, they all play. We all play off of our steering wheel. It's steering wheels. It's all trying to get the fingers under yourself. And then I would go home and I'd probably play the thing 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So I prepared literally 7 days a week, playing my fingers off, trying to make sure that I could play the tunes. And I had the tunes playable very early on, but really getting to the point where I was going to be able to be comfortable singing and playing them. Oh my gosh.
I mean, it sounds like you had this killer confidence with these guys. Like you were just, let's go.
I'm extremely I'm a very confident person. I'm an all-in kind of person. I'm not going to do it unless I'm going to be able to do it well. I mean, that's just how I am. You know, if I'm not going to be able to do it well, you're not going to find me doing it. So, so that, you know, maybe that narrows my line down a little bit, but I don't think so. I think I've got enough things that I do fairly well that enable me to do what I need to do. But yeah, I knew that I could do this. I needed to prove to myself that I could. But yeah, the hardest part of this was really singing and playing at the same time. And I was still working that up until literally the week of our first show.
Amazing.
But yeah, you know, the confidence to be able to go ahead and do that, you got to be confident. If you're not confident, it's going to read all over the place, right? And you're going to be eating for lunch.
People read right through it.
Yeah. So,
you know, especially for what you're doing, you know, you have to deal with the constant, you know, well, he's not John Waite, you know, it takes a confident person to do that. You know, I can say on my side of it, you know, doing a national tribute act, you know, we constantly go through that. We're compared to the real thing. Whereas like with what you're doing, you're thrown into the real thing and having to be compared. So it's got to be difficult.
It has its moments, right? You know, at the end of the day, it's not me versus John. It's all about the music. And this catalog has not really been played to the level that we're playing it since 1980, 81. So when you look back at it from that standpoint, that's it. When the Babies went kaput in 81, you know, only Waite plays the songs today, and he plays maybe less than a handful. And, you know, and typically John's got a guitar player, bass player, and a drummer.
Okay.
So not a keyboard player, not 2 background singers, not 2 guitars. Occasionally he will, you know, but by and large, really it's John and his versions of, you know, a few Babies tunes. So when we go out, I think we play the songs the way they were played on the record, right? So when you go to see a Baby show, you're going to hear what you heard on the record are pretty doggone close, right? A reasonable facsimile with an actual staged show with, you know, 7 people on stage, right? I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing to see.
And your confidence is definitely there, but you know, you've been in some pretty big audition scenarios, right?
You know, I had back in the day, you know, when you're faced with, I always tell my kids, don't go through life with a regret. Right. So when Mike Hansen called me up and said, I've got an audition for you, I looked back to late 80s, early 90s when, you know, Peter Cetera left Chicago and I went through the auditioning process. At the end of the day, it was, you know, Jason Sheff, myself, and I think 1 or 2 other people.
So you were on the short list.
I was shortlisted for that. It was, you know, Sheffy was excellent replacement for Cetera. The man could sing, and he plays the living crap out of the bass, right? I was more the singer who could, you know, there was no way that I could hold a candle to Sheff on the bass. You know, and the other one was Toto. You know, Bobby Kimball was exiting, and, you know, there was that opportunity. But in both cases, I was with, you know, a group of guys that I'd been with, you know, for years and years, and we were on the cusp of, you know, getting our first record deal, and, you know, it was kind of like, we were on the strip all the time, selling out. Everybody knew who we were, you know, and I opted to stay in that, and, you know, so there was my regret, you know. So when the Babies came around, I wasn't going to say no. I definitely, you know, jumped in both feet, and, you know, and I'm happy to say I got the job. So
third time's a charm, right?
You got it. Right. And, you know, at the end of the day, perfect spot, right? You know, I mean,
sure.
I love Toto, you know. Chicago, though, Chicago's it, man. Chicago would, you know, that would have been awesome. But, you know, when you really think about it, when I would write my material, I'd mention, you know, the Babies, that was it. You know, the Babies were it for me. So it was very cool. You don't often get to find yourself in that spot.
It's really neat, John.
Yeah.
So being a lifetime singer, and I know you use in-ear monitors because that's how we met, is at Ultimate Ears. What's that been like for you?
Oh, it's a lifesaver. So thanks for bringing it back to that, right? Because we really need to be talking about that.
We are here at Ultimate Ears Studio, right?
So, you know, I've always had to scream over and sing over really bad monitor systems and guitar players who play at 12.
Always.
Right? So,
or they say they're at 6, and when
it
you're
creeps.
like, okay, where did he go? And you turn around and he's turning up his amp during the first song, right?
Exactly. So, and I'm a very percussive, explosive singer. I'm not a subtle singer. I sing with a lot of force. So if I'm blowing hard and I'm blowing through my vocal cords, I'm burning myself out. I got fitted last year, I believe. Mm-hmm. And my first show was at a little place in Chicago, and we really didn't get. I really didn't get a stereo hookup on it, so we couldn't figure out how to do the mono piece, or we were late for our sound check. So I actually just did it with a single in-ear monitor and a wedge blowing at me. But I could hear a little bit of the difference. I could feel a little bit of the difference.
You could hear the potential.
Oh, and then the next night we figured it out, right? And so just imagine, and you do, being able to sing to your record, right? So if I've got a record going on in my head, and the beauty and the benefit of that is now I'm not over singing. I've got all the subtleties that I want to bring that I know I can't get across when I'm trying to do it live and I'm trying to hear what I'm doing through a monitor. And who knows if it's getting out there?
Right.
But I know it's here, and so therefore I've got the ability to, when you go and you sing an hour and a half, 2 hours a night, 5 nights in a row across 4 different states, and 8 to 10 hours driving,
different
and at the end of it, you've got
air
it.
Conditioning. They've
saved my life.
It's tough.
Yeah.
What do you like in your mix? What do you go with?
Right now, I'm using the UE7s, but I definitely need to go up to the 11s. But no, I virtually have the whole band.
So you have the whole band.
I start really if my vocal is. I tell the monitor, if you really had to pigeonhole me, give me the whole band at 6, kick and snare at 7 or 8. Put my vocal at 9, and the background somewhere around 7. So I've just got a good blend of everything, and then we'll go from there. Just hooked up with QSC, which is really nice.
Oh, okay.
So now we can. From here, just go and.
Isn't it nice to have Wi-Fi on stage?
Oh, and it's beautiful. I don't want that.
Right.
So that not completely integrated yet, but that's the next on the list. So
it's fun. I found it's not only saved me. Like I wouldn't be singing if it wasn't for the in-ears, but it's made me a better singer, and you become this like mad scientist. I've started to add reverb in my ears, and I'm EQing it at a certain level, and it's really a lot of fun, especially when you go to a venue where you have the sound guys that know exactly what they're doing.
Right. And sometimes you get them, and sometimes you don't.
And for us, it's more times than not that it's a struggle. But, I will say, when it is bad, you at least have the in-ear monitors that get you at least through the night.
Our last gig was in North Carolina. We're playing this weekend, but last gig was a few weeks ago in North Carolina, playing with Jefferson Starship. And went through our sound check. Everything was great. Dialed in, beautiful. Downbeat of the first songs, back on my feet again. Bop! All monitors go out. So there's nothing in the ears. There's nothing in the cans. The whole monitor feed went out. Either the guy inadvertently thought he had us muted and thought he unmuted at the beginning of the show so that we could hear what was going on, or he lost power due to the push of everybody hitting the downbeat of 1. Whatever.
Wow.
We did that first song literally with no monitors. So imagine that, right? Because we're locked in. You can't hear anything. So I'm relying on feeling kick and snare from behind me, because that guy can kick. So I feel him sometimes, depending on where we're at. I feel it in my back. So I had to rely on that happening for the whole song. It finally came on back literally maybe 10 seconds before the end of that song. It took them 3.5, 4 minutes to figure out what the problem was.
So what has Tony and Wally been like for you?
Oh, it's great, right? For me, it helps me to be able to speak in my London, a little bit of English accent.
It's all about. We're all about being in the babies, right?
They're proper. They're very proper gentlemen, and it's a very good thing. It's great, right? It's the stories, man.
Oh, I bet they're amazing, right?
The babies had their own set of stories. And then, when the babies broke up, I think Tony went briefly to Eddie Money, and then he went for like 12, 15 years with Rod Stewart, and Wally went there with him. So hearing the Rod stories, there's some big Rod Stewart stories You know, and then everything that's happened since then.
Which,
you know?
by the way, one of the best shows I've ever seen was Rod Stewart this past year at what is it, Caesar's Palace, that has the residency.
He's still killing it.
Amazing guy.
Yep.
Great singer.
Yep. Imagine, you know, I used to think that I really couldn't stand Rod Stewart's voice back in the day. I wish I could sing that bad and make that much money, you know. And then I look at it and go, no, dude, that man's got a gift. You know, it's a distinct, you know, and so back, you know, when you're young,
trying to impersonate that voice?
There's no way in the world. There's no way.
How is that done?
You know, there's a mixture of nodes and cigarettes and whiskey, and then I don't know. I have no idea.
Show.
That boy could sing. That boy could sing. You know, I get the. You know, I wasn't a big Stones fan until I hit my 40s. Going, oh my gosh, you know, Zeppelin, Beatles, and they're like, damn, the Stones, man, they're going to outlive us all.
Who would have thought?
Who do you know that's been around since before you were born and is still out there doing it?
And constantly reinventing themselves.
Amazing.
All right, so this is the part of the show where I'm going to throw out a few different questions.
Oh, is it like the fast fire, you know, quick fire round?
Pretty close to that. So we'll see how you do.
Okay.
It's very.
Is there a shock collar? Hold on. What are you doing with that?
A lot of pressure here, John. Here we go. All right. You're on a desert island, and for some unknown reason, there's power on this desert island, but only enough power to have power for your turntable. And you can only bring 3 albums on this island. Which albums do you bring? Now, I do have one rule.
Okay.
No greatest hits albums. No cheating.
Fleetwood Mac Rumors.
Perfect.
3 Sides Live Genesis.
Okay.
Oh, I'm going to be in trouble by saying this. Big Bam Boom by Hall & Oates.
Hall & Oates.
Friggin' love Hall & Oates, man. Yeah.
Isn't Hall & Oates funny? I think back to Hall & Oates as a youngster, and that I just couldn't stand them when I was a kid. But as you get older, you realize what's truly going on in that band.
Yeah.
All right, that's a good choice. Yeah. Usually it takes people like 10 minutes to get through these things.
Yeah,
3 good albums.
Those are fun albums for me. Yeah.
Food you can't live without.
I would like to have said that I could not live without popcorn or sunflower seeds. They are my absolute favorite foods of life. But due to health reasons, I can no longer eat them. That's what I would say. But now I will say... So you can't go to a movie theater then because there's no way... I can just smell it, you know. No, and I cheat. When I cheat, I pay for it. So no, I can't do it. It really, really absolutely sucks. Food that I could not do without. Well, let's see. What do I eat? Well, I like sushi, so I'll just say sushi.
Sushi's good.
Put it out there.
And we live in Southern California.
Yes,
you can't beat the sushi.
I love sushi.
You cannot beat our sushi out here.
Yep.
Favorite TV show growing up?
Can I give you a bunch? MASH, Hogan's Heroes, Get Smart. You know, I mean, anything that make you laugh, man.
I love
and those
Get Smart.
all were around forever.
Sorry about that, Chief.
Would you believe
the old bubblegum in the shoe routine? That's the third time.
I saw Get Smart about 6 months ago, and it still holds up. Jaime, bounce on over here.
Doing what? Who's that? Dick Gaudier?
Oh, right.
Dick Gaudier was
very
Jaime.
good.
Yeah.
Chief
Max.
John Bisaha, where can everybody find you, man?
You can find me at john@thebabiesofficial.com. That's my email address for anybody who wants to reach me. But the babies, that's our website, thebabiesofficial.com. We're on Facebook at The Babies Official. We're on Twitter at Tweet the Babies, or I am John Bisaha at Twitter, John Bisaha on Facebook.
John Bisaha, thank you for coming in. This was a fun talk, my friend.
This was absolutely the best.
Wasn't it cool?
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. You are marvelous.
So let's get something straight, music fans. Back in the day, I would put the Babies up there with Foreigner and Journey. Both those bands are doing extremely well right now, and doing it without their original lead singers, Lou Gramm and Steve Perry. So make sure and check John out with the Babies. You won't be disappointed. This week's Artist Spotlight comes as no surprise. I felt it only appropriate to play the upcoming single by the Babies. It's a killer tune. It has that late 70s Babies vibe, and my buddy John does an amazing vocal. The song is called Not Ready to Say Goodbye, Check it out and support this great band. Enjoy.
When you were around, you know you meant the world to me. They were easier times, or at least that's how it seemed. Might have to work harder now, but that's the life we chose. You helped me more than you ever know, more than you know. Take me home, my favorite place to be. My eyes come alive, you wake me up, help me live out this crazy dream. Though things are different now, doesn't mean that it's the end. You make me wanna do it again and again. Let's do it again. Love it when you say my name. Let's draw from the past, push into tomorrow, and be glad we stayed.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Cover Your Ears. John simply rocks. And when one has the opportunity to jump into one of my favorites, Get Smart, well, what can I say? Life is good. Cover Your Ears is brought to you by Heil Sound. Heil is all about that perfect sounding microphone. And it just so happens they've been doing it for quite some time. 50 years of rock. So be a part of it. Anybody that's been around that long is definitely for real. Check out Heil at www.heilsound.com. Check for brand new episodes of Cover Your Ears each and every Tuesday. I'd love to hear your feedback too. You can contact me with any comments, suggestions, or questions at briangellervo@gmail.com. And if you like the podcast, make sure and leave a review wherever you may have found Cover Your Ears. Hey, and do a guy a favor. Tell a friend. Oh, and if you have something interesting to say and you're in the business, let me know. it could make for a real fun show.